Sound okay? How's the audio? How's your mama? Oh, I thought that in the spirit of ordinary brotherhood and ecumenicalism, that we ought to at least set aside just a second and recognize the fact that all religions, philosophies, cultures, and laundry detergents are about the same. At least to enlightened consumers all the way around. We were still surveying, or we were about to still survey, if we get our tenses right. God, it's terrible to be tense. But we were still going to survey that area that says only the uncertain is alive. And after having started that last time, I am confident that you all fully grasp that we are speaking of the secondary world as we have been dividing it up. The secondary intellectual world of man, for there is certainly no uncertainty in man's primary world, in the basic physical world, at the minimal level that would keep us all alive and keeps itself alive. In that domain, there is no uncertainty. We pointed out at the individual level, there is no uncertainty at the individual level as to whether a person is hungry. Hungry. Talking about eating, not dining, not the hobby. And there is no ambiguity about an earthquake. They're just not. There is no such thing as equivocal death. So it's not just, as I was pointing out last time, at the individual level, which you can surely see from the 3 S's. They do not operate on the basis of certainty. When you're dealing with the sane primary world, which out there, appears to be out there, we'll consider right now that it's all sane. Notwithstanding what appears from our ordinary level to be temporary anomalies, such as plagues and earthquakes and etc., which seem to do large, massive harm to men, and men seem to have this inclination to take it very personally. And those that survive tend to speak out about it. You know, about the great religion of cuts and bruises, of which many people claim they were not an active participant. But at the individual level, there being no uncertainty. You cannot be sane at the primary level and have any uncertainty about eating. You cannot have any uncertainty about simply keeping yourself alive, and then via sex, of course, keeping the area alive, keeping man alive. But I just wanted you to see that even expands into the sanity of the primary world, that there is no uncertainty as to what goes on. Earthquakes do not start kind of, well, I don't know. Take out of L.A. maybe toward Encino, or is that going south? Anyway, an earthquake doesn't start and then go, they simply do not. And when it gets to another aspect of what would seem to be more personal to man, perhaps, even in death, there is no uncertainty. You're either dead or you're not. So when we're using that kind of descriptive verbal level in this division of the primary and the secondary world, while we're noting that the basic physical primary life of man seems to have generally reached, as far as we can tell now, is it just generally reached a kind of plateau of stability and relative certainty. That is, in your lifetime, in a general level of things, in the overall lifetime of recorded history, the last 5,000 or 6,000 years, there has been no substantial shift in the primary world. Man is basically what he was. So even while we note that which is obvious, that there is a certainty, there is a sanity, there is a security, there is a stability about the primary world in the mainstream, not the anomalies and not the fringes. Even while we note that, you have got to then realize that on the other gesture, hand. That on the other hand, to live and grow the secondary world must be in a continual state of uncertainty. And so to bring us sort of up to date, let us propose the first law of uncertainty. Here it is. The secondary world must continually reinvent itself. By the way, that's the first and the second and the third. But notice the primary world does not reinvent itself. Not in any, unless you were really getting slick on your own, and it's got nothing to do with what we're talking about really, but you can say that an earthquake, since I brought it up, or a volcano eruption, is in a sense a reinvention out there, but that's not what we're talking about with man. The primary world, insofar as man is concerned, other than him staying out of the way of volcanoes whenever possible, the primary world of man is not reinventing itself. You do not get up, individually or collectively, humanity, and your liver is straining to become something else. To become a better liver. To become a super liver. To become a with it liver. A hip liver. The primary world as it is in man is quite, shall we say, acceptable. I'll say that. Quite acceptable. That is not a question of it being reinvented. The secondary world must, to survive, it must continually reinvent itself. Constantly, constantly, constantly. That is the first, second, and third ... laws of uncertainty. It either continually reinvents itself or it would perish. Without any great intent to go off on this, which I'm about to do, I'm going to hope that some of you can do it on your own, or already did before I could even say it. In the secondary world, there are areas continually, every day, such as a kind of figurative shedding of skin. The secondary world is continually in areas not reinventing itself and perishing. Fads being a great thing, fashion, not that those are of any particular importance, but those things, ideas, theories, religious beliefs, philosophies, moralities of certain kinds that were here yesterday and now, who remembers? They did perish. They did not get reinvented. The secondary world must stay in a state of uncertainty. And what that amounts to is literally a reinvention of itself continually, or it perishes. And although it does in singularities, you do notice the intellectual world, the secondary world of man, has yet to perish. Of course, by other areas of life's body via man, there are those carping and railing about it, about the whole thing about change is going on too swiftly, which is part of what evidently the purpose of the secondary world is to putting on age. But Kyroots already had somebody remind you that if you let age take from your mind that which it takes from your muscles, then you are going to passively and properly accept that generic prescription of the inevitable that everybody swallows. A revolutionist would sew his lips together. At any rate, the very things, and it's natural, you know that we're not laughing at ordinary people. That is part of, as every generation knows. And it happens contemporaneously within any generation. But it is a continuing problem, it seems, because of the dance. The couple on the dance floor, as all of you know by now, is actually three people. But the couple on the dance floor, there is always a feeling by one of them that we must dance a bit more conservatively here. So there is always a feeling, not only out there on the dance floor, since you are the dance floor, but that, I don't mind a little change, perhaps, or I don't mind trying something new if it's a new flavor of ice cream, or if it's a new stamp, if you're a stamp collector. Oh, all right, I'll go get a new one. But the mind looks out as it's proper to the dance floor, and there is too much uncertainty. And it seems to increase. It is a nexus that is of no great mathematical importance, but in the ordinary world, the older you get, there's no doubt. And I can say it, and you can think, well, that is so obvious now that you mention it that I won't let it get me. And if you still got hormones, it's going to get you, if you stay at the hormonal level. And that is that every day that goes by, after a certain age, of course, most of you don't have to worry about it because, hell, you got to be at least all 19 or 20 for this to have any effect. And then, of course, the damage is done. It's like I've already got, slight brain damage. How much worse can it be? It's like every day it goes by, you see more and more that, well, now, when I was young, we were wild a little bit. I mean, sure, we had a little fun. We'd throw maybe a small rock through somebody's window down the street. But Jesus Christ, these kids nowadays, they're throwing bricks through people's windows. It all is a tangible reflection of the uncertainty, because that is not a physical part, that is not a primary part of the world, although it is physical. It is still a manifestation, because you've got to look at that as an outgrowth of the primary world. Throwing rocks, since I'm just pull that out, throwing rocks at somebody's window, that has nothing to do with the primary world, other than everything comes from the primary world. That is not a manifestation of the primary world. That is not a manifestation of certainty. That which is referred to from varying extremes on the polarized dance floor, from morality, which seems to be feelings, to fallacious knowledge. All that seems to be on the basis that it's too uncertain. You can't depend on morality. You can't depend even on facts. You can't depend on science. It keeps changing. If it was not changing, it's in the process of perishing. And yet the mind is wired up. Everyone's mind is ordinarily wired up because it is part of the energy of the dance floor, it's part of the energy driving life, that you're correct at the ordinary level. Absolutely correct. To feel that things are getting out of hand. And the older you get, I say this enough that you can laugh, but you turn on the president, the Pope. Look at your own father, mother. And of course, those of you that are really dirty, you might every now and then go and take a glance with that person that some of you realize may be living in the house with you. Yeah. And it is just as natural as getting bags under your eyes and your hair thinning. Or if you're the wrong sex, begin to get hair in places that you don't really need hair. It is as natural, you cannot help it, that your hormones begin to more and more try and make the lamb talk. And the lamb goes, as lambs, if you want to see a coincidence, what do? They go, bah. Which I got to suggest to you wasn't the point, but that's awfully close to the English word bad. Because the older Mary gets, the lighter fluid that she furnishes when the lamb starts to cook, which he's got to have, the more and more, the louder and louder, the lamb says, bah. It's just obvious that things are getting worse and worse. Things are getting, civilization is just coming apart. All that is being reflected there is the improperly measured, from our view, acknowledgement that life is still alive and uncertain. Because if it were not uncertain in the secondary world would be perishing. That, as is often the case, and if you can follow that right quick, if what the ordinary mind would tell you could happen, that is, if things would simply go back closer to what they were a few years back or when I was growing up, things would be better off, it'd be just the opposite. You can't prove that to the ordinary mind, but do you understand that if indeed you could stop this kind of uncertainty, if someone could stand up, some philosopher, some religious leader, just some social critic, and stand up and say, well, look, I've heard enough of this kind of dime store philosophy from people like you, I'm going to tell you what, the world is getting worse, and they can prove it. You know, crime is up, morality is down, the family's falling apart. And they say, I'm telling you that if we could go back, when I was growing up, I don't know why, but when I was growing up, if we could go back to 1952, I'm just making this up, and we could take everything right now and take it back there and let it sort of stay there, we would be much better off. The family would be better. We would be having a better relationship with our children, blah, blah, blah. And from anybody that was of a similar age there in the city that heard a man say that, they would go, well, yeah, that's true. And it's not true. Oh, it's true to them. It is true. But it's not true, do you understand? Because they would have then be, if they could go back and do that, they would be choking off the uncertainty. That if we could go back, and I say 1952, pick anything you want to, 1492, 1050. Pick out your favorite time in history. I know some people, it was last Thursday night. Well, pick out your best time in history, and you might have great agreement with you know, by history, by other observers of the time. But if you could go back, you realize that if you could actually do that, you would have strangled off the uncertainty starting there in the secondary world. If you had had such power, it would have perished. It also, since that is the first, second, third law of uncertainty, I was going to point out there is a kind of variation of me saying that the secondary world must continually reinvent itself or perish. Kind of a substrata of that law is that law that I just said is also in part, could be put like this, that this reinvention of itself is also a constant reconfusing of itself. Not, obviously some of you might be able to use that little side note, but it is a kind of, from one view, the health of the secondary world, the thriving, the boom times of the secondary world are reflected in a continuing uncertainty, but from quite valid views, this is also a kind of constant reconfusing of itself. Again, look at your own nervous system, your own mind at its ordinary level. The older you get, it seems like the more likelihood the damn ship is sinking. And it seems to get more and more, not just uncertain, not just more and more dangerous, not just more and more immoral out there, but it also seems to get more and more what? Confusing. That used to I understood, I'm talking for an ordinary person, used to I understood what the hell was going on. There was a right, there was a wrong. You know, you could depend that Tide was a better laundry detergent than something that was just, you know, damn Kroger house brand. And nowadays, it's just so confusing you don't know what to do. It is the reinvention, the self-reinvention of the secondary world is a kind of, quite truly from that view, is a kind of constant reconfusing of itself. Does anybody remember the Kyroots? I believe it was attributed to the squirrels, or a squirrel, of a few nights back. There was a kind of a squirrely update of one of the old proverbs that said that it was contrary to the ordinary city human version, that uncertainty was the mother of invention. Remember that? The squirrels, I of course think, gave you people credit that it didn't actually go through and restate the original proverb, but everybody knows the original proverb is, what the hell is it? Oh, necessity is the mother of all invention. And the squirrel pointed out, the update, the subversive version is, you know, that's all right. But uncertainty, which we hadn't started talking about then, maybe that's why some of you people didn't get it. Yeah, that's it. Uncertainty is the mother of invention. And then the squirrel also added, but hell, uncertainty is the mother of everything. You remember it now? I know now that I've said it, I almost do. Uncertainty is the mother of everything in the secondary world. Now, consider, having said that even though in specific instances in the secondary world, that, and still not ignoring, because me saying the update is from necessity is the mother of invention, me saying now uncertainty is the mother of invention, hell is the mother of everything, unquote. But still keeping in mind that humanity has used that. It has been, albeit a rather crude reflection as always, to say that necessity is. Even after having said that, and said that a more complex, more cogent, more revealing version would be to say that uncertainty is a mother, still looking back, or look in your own nervous system / history, at the way life is developed, we could pick out specific examples, such as specific instances, the need to refrigerate food to keep it edible. That in some way men had to be able to store food, not just refrigeration, but it finally came to that, but to store away food, that good old classic kind of description of moving from the caveman feral times and being wanderers to where men could settle down and become civilized and have music and art and swap wives and collect photographs or something. The secondary world that men had to be able to settle. And part of being able to settle was being able to not just hunt, but then start growing things. But then an offshoot of growing things is not only be able to grow them, but then I have to depend on just where the weather was just right and the planting season, etc. It's to store it. So, over a general area, you could say that here's a specific instance. How can we store food and keep it edible? So we could say in a specific instance, the secondary world, the mind, seemed to specifically address a problem. It came up with refrigeration. You're not lost yet, are you? So although that seems to be that fits in, well, that obviously fits in with the old version, the ordinary version, to say that necessity is the mother of invention. You can say, well, eventually we got to refrigeration, all the way from probably the caveman finally finding out that they could stick a piece of meat up against a stalactite in their cave, and it would last longer. So it went from that. So the need, the necessity, produced the invention of refrigeration. So that seems to be right down the line, that necessity is the mother of invention. And me saying uncertainty is actually the mother of invention. So although in specific instances, apparent specific needs were met, were addressed, were met, beyond that, you got to get past that, because ordinary minds have already gone that far. Beyond that, there is a general, unrecognized, but a general operational structure that is man's unrelenting uncertainty of his entire secondary existence. So thus, it's not just, to stay with that example, thus it's not just a matter, although as pressing as it was, it's not just a matter of how do we keep food edible for long periods of time. It's not just that. What I'm telling you, that's as far as the ordinary mind has ever had any need to go, is to see the specifics and say yes, yes, yes. Beyond that, there is a continuing, unnoted question and an uncertainty, not just how to keep food edible, but there is a question, whether it's stated this way or not, in everybody's wiring system, a question, an uncertainty, a need to be met, and the uncertainty is just what to do about being alive. Do you follow? That everything that is now extant and widespread and general use in the secondary world was necessary. Refrigeration, automobiles, cardboard packaging for laundry detergents. And then as that becomes unacceptable to life, if it does, then something else. They'll make the carton out of detergent. Which is another Kyroots somewhere. But do you see, all of those are specific. And you could just stop there and say, what a wondrous thing is the mind. What a wondrous thing is the needs of the secondary world. And it's true. I'll say wondrous. It's wondrous if you're a kid. Because the real wonder is beyond that. That is specifics. There is an unnoted general uncertainty. Not just uncertainty about how can we store food, or not just the uncertainty as to how can we actually engage in the kind of necessary commerce and movement of goods at this particular time frame in life if we do not have faster and faster means of literal transportation of goods, and nowadays more and more a more rapid transportation of information. So all of these seems to be, and they are at that level, questions that need immediate, questions, needs that must be addressed, that must be met. So there's no doubt about that. But do you hear when I say the uncertainty of the secondary world, life looks after that. The collective efforts of man, if life needs a faster means, if it needs bigger computers, if it needs something super fiber optics, if it needs some way to transfer nowadays more and more information rather than dealing with, that's giving you a physical description of moving oil and grains, which is still necessary, of course, because all that's primary, the way it's built into the system. But more and more, there are needs that have to immediately be met. So there's no doubt about that. And they do get met by the collective efforts of man. Those of you that are getting sharp enough, which is a form of, I don't want to say laziness, do I? Unabashed, secret confidence. How about that? Life, if life needs some new form of super optics, if that's your hobby, by the way, and you're working on it, go ahead. But if you're convinced, if you suddenly hear or read about that the whole world's economy, as intertwined as it's become, is going to break down, I mean, regardless, notwithstanding the great breakthroughs we've made in computing, communications, the whole area of electronics in the last decade, just amazing. But if you read that there's no doubt, the experts say, if we do not come up with something within the next 18 months that is even faster and will handle more complex and larger amounts of information than even fiber optics, the world economy could grind to a halt. Now let's say that you read that and it just strikes you for whatever silly reason, that by God, that sounds true. If it is true. But remember, if it's your hobby, press on. Hell, you might make a fortune. But if it's not your hobby and you read it and you think, oh, that sounds serious. At no additional charge, I don't normally do this, but I will give you my solemn money-back guarantee that life suddenly will come up with a new system. All of you know that by now. So, it's a marvel. The real marvel is that is not the basic drive of the uncertainty. These individual needs are not really the needs. To go back to the old version of the proverb, that invention or they're not the necessities. Back to the old proverb, the original version of necessity is the mother of invention. That is, in these specific cases, that we need faster ways to move information. We need more efficient ways, less damaging to the environment, to move petrochemicals, whatever it is. All of those specifics may be true and they may not. They're all transient. That is not the basic drive of the necessity in the proverb that necessity is the mother of all invention, and that's what keeps civilization growing, becoming more complex and expanding. Yes, it is in specifics, but what can't be seen, what the ordinary mind does not see, is there's a background to that. There's like a radiation noise that never goes away. It is the same as the primary, giving birth always and always being the source of anything that's of the secondary nature. Behind these specific necessities that life needs is this general necessity, which I have translated for you from necessity being the mother of invention to uncertainty. And the uncertainty is not just how we're going to move more information, which may be important, or how we're going to keep food stable for longer periods of time, which may be true. The background, the unnoted necessity that drives all this, uncertainty, is what in the hell is going on? Why am I alive? What am I doing here? What am I going to do about being alive? That is it. That, put in words, that is what drives the secondary world. Generally, that is the overall structure and fueling of the secondary world. Everything else is specifics. That's what ordinary people see, and they're supposed to see. That yes, there are uncertainties. An ordinary intelligence might say to me doing this, say, well, all right, we'll change it from necessity is the mother of invention to say uncertainty. If you want to put it that way, I'm still talking for ordinary intelligence. And they can say, all right, there is an uncertainty. We have reached the absolute max load of moving stock information. We cannot move. Now we're trying to run 20 or are running, for all I know, 24-hour stock exchanges around the world. It is reaching max. It has reached the saturation point, and is going to become an inverse. It's going to become what they call it downside. It's going to become anti-profitable, or whatever the latest slang is. They're saying we have got to do something. There is a pressing need now. There is a necessity. And I'm still talking for ordinary intelligence. They could say, now, instead of us calling it necessity, we'll use your term uncertainty. The uncertainty is what's going to happen. What if all of these communications in the world's great markets, the financial markets, the futures markets, what's going to happen? It is uncertain because we see that it's reached the point now that it's going to begin to fall apart. All right, we'll call it uncertainty. Something's got to happen. That's the specifics. And if it is indeed that important, life will take care of it collectively. If you want to, join in. There is a continuing uncertainty that is not specific, and it is never addressed. It is never met. And that is the uncertainty of what in the hell am I going to do about being alive? You know, what else do I have to say? Whatever terms, everybody feels it. Your nervous system is not simply a manifestation of the Lamb. Everyone, no matter how they express, bah, everyone has the feeling about what in the hell am I doing here? Of course, out the fringes, people, the old soreheads of the Kyroots stories, you know, they have the attitude of, what in the hell am I doing here? But the background of this uncertainty that manifests itself in the specifics that causes civilization to evolve, that causes man to civilly progress, to technologically progress, that's all in the specifics of how to refrigerate food, how to move more information. But the overall is never addressed, it's never met, or it'd be suicidal if it's never even addressed. That is, people do not even think in this way. What is really driving the need of all uncertainties, of how are we going to move more information? I understand it's a specific need right now. But what's really driving that is the uncertainty that everyone's nervous system feels. What am I doing here? What am I supposed to do here? What do I do next? What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to react to this crap? What am I supposed to think when people do this? What's going on here? That is the uncertainty. And that is what continually reinvents itself, and I'm not speaking technologically. That is what continually reinvents itself so that no matter what specific problems apparently get met. And well, we wrapped up that problem, now we can refrigerate food. Was that the end of civilization? Well, damn, if it ain't one thing, it's another, isn't it? And a little guy in the Amen corner said, thank God. Go figure.